Sandra, what are the political ramifications of all of this? Let's bring in our panel. Karl Rove, former White House Deputy Chief of Staff, and Juan Williams, a Fox News senior political analyst. Karl, start us off here. Biden appears to be trying to walk this issue with one foot on either side of the fence. But in doing so, he just seems to be angering both sides.
Yeah, look, that largely stems from the impromptu comment that he made, where on the one hand he came out against the protests and the attacks on Israel and Jewish students, and on the other hand had to recognize the plight of the Palestinians. The statements, the written statements, and the spokesman from the White House have been generally pretty tough, but the president himself set the tone by answering that question in ad hoc. Look, this is going to get worse before the end of the school year. Unless these universities step in and make certain that students are allowed to go to campus, go to classes, and that the campuses are not overtaken by student protesters, this is going to be an ugly scene. But imagine what it's going to be like in August when the Democrats meet in Chicago and we have enormous crowds of protesters in Grant Park during the Democratic National Convention. Not going to be a pretty sight, and going to be reminiscent of 1968 and the famous Democratic Convention that was racked by protests over the Vietnam War.
They better have a whole bucket of grease to put on the Grant statue to stop people from climbing it, that's for sure. Juan, what do you think of the way that the president has handled this so far? What Karl was alluding to, what he said the other day, has been likened to what Donald Trump said about Charlottesville, that there are, quote, fine people on both sides. What do you say?
I don't see the parallel, John. I mean,
Why?
Clearly, people can say, and I think the American people in polling have said they support Israel. They are opposed to anti-Semitism, and certainly any kind of bullying, intimidation by these young people on the campuses. At the same time, you can be concerned with the plight of the Palestinian people in terms of a very strong Israeli military offensive that has devastated much of Gaza. Those are two separate issues, and I think that's what the president was speaking to, very much unlike Charlottesville. In terms of the politics, you know, the reality is that, you know, the election is not until November. And a lot of these young people who are out here today have strong disagreements with the President Biden's support of Israel, continued funding, military support. But, you know, look at Ilhan Omar, you know, the congresswoman, member of the squad, who has strong disagreements with Biden's Israeli policies. Recently, she said, oh, I'm voting for Biden. And I think right now that's where the White House is thinking, is a lot of these young people have strong disagreements. They have First Amendment rights, but it's not likely they're going to change their vote. We didn't see that last night in Pennsylvania. Biden did very well. He did better than Trump did in terms of Democratic votes.
Yeah, well, we still don't know what the scope of the uncommitted vote is at this point, though we will likely in the days ahead. I mean, in terms of Ilhan Omar, Karl, other members of the squad, I think that they're probably voting for Biden because who else are you going to vote for? And to some degree, they appear to be driving the bus here. I mean, this is what AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, said about these protests in direct contradiction to what Biden said. She said, calling in police enforcement on nonviolent demonstrations of young students on campus is an escalatory, reckless, and dangerous act that represents a heinous failure of leadership that puts people's lives at risk. I condemn it in the strongest possible terms. Biden's condemning the anti-Semitism that's going on with these things, and she's saying, I'm behind you all the way.
Yeah. Well, look, we're talking about not what the politicians are going to do. Certainly, the AOC and the squad are going to say we're loyal Democrats and we support Joe Biden. But look at the grassroots. Look at the results of the Pennsylvania primary. There's an 8% gap. That is to say, if you look at the share of the two-party registration in Pennsylvania, the Democrats have an 8% advantage over Republicans. The turnout was a 2% advantage. No races at the top of the ticket, but the Democrat advantage in registration virtually disappeared when the actual turnout was there. That is not a good sign. And Juan can say that there's plenty of time for this to get handled by the November election, but this animus towards Israel and support for the Palestinian cause from the river to the sea, as they say, the extinction of the state of Israel, is very strong in certain elements of the Democratic Party, and it's going to be reflected with people turning out and people failing to turn out and not voting for Joe Biden in the presidential race.
So what do you say about that, Juan, that he's alienating Jewish voters and at the same time he's not going to win back the Arab and Muslim Americans in places like Dearborn, Michigan? They're gone.
Well, I think what Karl said is on target. You know, I mean, it's a matter of, are you going to have people who don't show up at the polls? And Karl pointed last night to the level of activism among Democratic voters in the Pennsylvania primary. But again, I would just point out that, you know, in terms of actual vote, Joe Biden did better in terms of reining in, capturing Democratic votes than former President Trump did in capturing Republican votes. And the second thing to say here is, I think a lot of people have to make the case, and this is on the Biden campaign to do it, that, you know, it's a matter of free speech and expression, as long as you're nonviolent, non-threatening, not anti-Semitic. But you have a right to express your opinion, and it's a matter of democracy. And then they'll say, and look at the alternative. If you care about democracy, are you voting for Biden, or are you going to vote for Trump? You know, what an option. That makes Biden look quite appealing.
Yeah, well, I think the issue, though, is that with a lot of these protesters, they are definitely engaging in harassment. There's a lot of anti-Semitism that's floating around.
That's wrong.
Yeah, definitely. Juan, Karl, great to see you. Thanks for kicking us out today. Appreciate it.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.